Hello, friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to Community Keynotes. My name is Melissa Majors. I'm blessed to be the creator of the show, but it would not be possible without the man you see on the screen there, my co-producer, Amani Roberts. What's up, Amani?
Nothing much. Excited about today's episode. I have a feeling we're going to hear some good stories.
Oh, yes. And for those of you that didn't tune in last week, Amani's not just our co-producer, he was the featured speaker on our show last week. Thank you again, Amani, for such an incredible experience. How do you feel now that you shared your own story?
I feel some relief. I'm very proud. It went over very well. So thank you for inspiring me to step up and share my story. I'm very happy with how it turned out.
Oh, me too. You created a lot of buzz on social media, so thank you, and dropped some major wisdom. And our speaker today is going to drop some wisdom on us as well. I am blessed to have met Cass about 6 months ago, and I was instantly drawn to her energy. Like, she's so positive and optimistic, wicked smart and funny as all get out. Never in a million years, Amani, would I have thought she was suffering from a hidden illness, and one that she hid for fear of shame. But she's spilling her guts with us today. She isn't hiding anymore. So viewers from wherever you're watching, whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, please help me welcome to the Community Keynote stage, Ms. Cass McMann.
Hello. Thank you, Melissa, for having me. Everyone, I have a secret. I love hospitals. Not just hospitals, but surgery specifically. I love the cold room controlled, temperature controlled room. I love the warm therapeutic blankets they bring you, in case you get hypothermia. I love surgery because also you get a pretty good medically induced nap. And I should know because after 25 years of living with Crohn's disease, I have had over 14 surgeries and or overnight hospital stays. At 14 years old, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. It is a gastrointestinal disorder, and it affects anywhere in your digestive system. It is chronic. It is lifelong. There is no cure, only treatment. At the time of my diagnosis, I had so much unexplained weight loss. I was 5'8" and 97 pounds. My parents and doctors assumed that I had an eating disorder because any type of rapid weight loss at that age is typically considered to be a sign of anorexia or bulimia. And I remember going to the doctor and being in really, really excruciating pain and not knowing what was going on, also being turned away from my own body weight and not being able to see what was happening with my body. There was a lot of shame and uncertainty at that point in my life living with Crohn's, an illness that was hidden. Couldn't see it from the outside. One thing that I realized very, very quickly was in coping with my illness, I needed to always be prepared. And preparedness came in the form of always having an extra pair of panties in my backpack, because you never know after you eat what's going to happen. Are you going to vomit or not make it to the bathroom? I remember in 8th grade, I finished lunch and everyone else went out to the playground to play and get their outdoor time and their activity time. And I adjourned to the porcelain throne. And I guess I forgot to lock the door because I'm sitting there minding my business, and in walks Tom. And the look on his face, the shock, the embarrassment for me and for him, I think at that point, his poor 14-year-old body had never smelled something so horrible as that time that we were in the bathroom. Quickly closed the door. And to this day, we've never talked about it. And Tom, if you're watching, I forgive you. I wish I could go back to 14-year-old Cass. I wish I could go back and I could tell her that there's no shame in having Crohn's. It's the most hidden things, the ones that are causing the most profound pain. Those are the things that are going to make you you. So like most 8th graders, I moved on to high school. And for most of high school, I was in a cycle of hospitalization. I would stay about 4 or 5 days. I would get the right IV antibiotics and fluids and nutrients and treatments. And I'd be okay for about 6, maybe as many as 9 months, taking my medication properly. And then I started to feel better. So I would stop taking my medicine, and herein lies the cycle. Finally, in 1999, I had a gastric resection where about a foot of my intestines were removed. The GI tract is a very interesting and complex system. Quick biology lesson, it moves, your food as well as nutrients through, which is essentially a muscle, through your tract, allowing you to absorb nutrients and water through osmosis. The average lower intestine is about a little over an inch in diameter. And at the time of my resection, mine was the diameter of a dime. Nothing was getting through. And in order to avoid having a blockage and having any more severe issues and problems, I had to have it removed. One thing that Crohn's has definitely made me is hard-headed. No. I'm going to say determined and resilient. Before my diagnosis in 7th grade, along with Tom, I went on a trip to Chicago. And I knew from the moment that I got to that city that that is where I was going to live. I knew that I wanted to go to school there. And so in junior year of my high school experience, I applied to only schools in Chicago. I applied to Loyola and Northwestern, University of Chicago. And finally, I decided to attend DePaul University. I was ecstatic, but at the time, I was not living with my disease. I was more coping with it. I wasn't managing it at all. My pediatric gastroenterologist told me that the only person that was worth seeing in Chicago, since that's where I was headed, was Dr. Stephen Hanauer. And 19-year-old Cass was able to sit with him as well as his nurse, Debbie. And for the first time in my life, I was active in my care. I was able to assemble a care team that was there to look after me and my health and my best interest. And I remember sitting there with Nurse Debbie, tears in my eyes, and her holding my hand and saying, "Cass, it's not always going to be like this. You're going to be better." I'm not sure how many 19-year-olds you've been around recently, but at 19, that is the last thing I wanted to hear. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to go out and make friends and experience college in the best city in the world like normal people. I didn't want to have to carry an extra change of underwear in my pants anymore, in my purse anymore. Luckily for me, Dr. Hanauer was an amazing doctor, and I was able to be put on a biologic drug that I am still currently on, and it changed my life. After college, I moved to Texas. And like most things that require moving, you might forget something. For me, that was insurance. See, while I was really happy with my treatment, what I wasn't happy with was the bill that I had following all of the treatments that I had. When I left college, when I left Chicago, I had roughly $250,000 worth of medical debt. That's right, $250,000 in medical debt. And that was with the insurance that I had under my parents. So when I moved to Texas, no insurance, no medication, meant relapse, meant I got sick. Good thing was that unlike 14 and 19-year-old Cass, 25-year-old Cass was well adjusted to coping with the pain that came along with my disease. I was able to manage it in a way that I had never been able to before. The doctor I was seeing at the time, he was okay at best. I didn't really trust him. He didn't have a great bedside manner. And I knew that I needed some additional treatment and care. In my opinion, there's two types of gastroenterologists. There's the type that treat pain and manage symptoms, and then there's the type that attack and manage the disease. And he was the type that treated pain. And as long as I was not telling him what my pain was, and he was not seeing any real symptoms, he didn't see anything wrong with my care. I remember it had been about 5 years since my colonoscopy, my last colonoscopy. And side note, if you're over the age of 45 and you have never had a colonoscopy, this is my plug. It is an inconvenience, but it's a preventative measure that is much necessary in order for your gastric health. And you get a really good nap, and you get 12, 24 hours maybe away from responsibility, and your family hopefully will take care of you and allow you to binge watch your favorite Netflix shows. So back to my doctor, I had asked him for a colonoscopy. It had been about 5 years, and he refused. He said I didn't have any real reason to have one. And at that point, I fired him. I had to. For my best interest and for my health, I had to get rid of this doctor. And I'm really glad that I went and got a second opinion. That's what led me to my current GI, Thomas Van Dinter, not the same Tom from before. And he sat in his office and he said, you know what, Cass, you're right. 5 years is a good time for us to check. Let's just see what's going on. And I'm so glad that we did, because it was found that I had active disease all throughout my gut, as well as precancerous polyps. Now, precancerous polyps are relatively normal occurrence for people with Crohn's disease. That's why we get colonoscopies. That's why we investigate when things are not going right, and just on a regular basis. But it's also not the message you want to get at 6 p.m. on a Friday. Needless to say, that weekend was not a good weekend for me. So in the spirit of Nurse Debbie, I went to Dr. Van Dinter, and he told me, he's like, it's going to be okay. There are solutions here, and we will find them. Side note, my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, but now my husband, he went with me. And it was really, really critical to include him in that time and in that space. Get you a partner who's going to sit there in the room and who's going to be more anxious than you may be when you may receive bad news. There's always solutions. It requires a very rigorous care team, a group of professionals as well as support who are going to be there for you in your times of struggle and your times where you want to turn inward, where the shame may be overwhelming, but they're the people to turn to help you the best. There is no shame in what you can't control. There's no shame in me having Crohn's disease. But what I can control is my reaction. My body may be trying to sabotage me on a regular basis, but I can be in control of my care. So my final thoughts are this: if I can leave you with anything, remember to be your own patient advocate. If you go to a doctor and they ask questions, or they give you a diagnosis or a medication that you don't understand, that you don't know, ask lots of questions. Ask until they explain it in a way that you understand. Yes, there's WebMD and there's Google and all of these amazing resources, but your best advocate is going to be your own voice inside that room with your doctor. And for caretakers out there, just remember you're on the team too. Lean into the patient in your life, because sometimes all that they need is someone to hold their hand, be in the room, and tell them it's going to be okay.
Cass, wonderful job. Wonderful job.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. You continue to amaze me, my dear, and you have inspired many. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. and for telling us about your rock star doctor, Dr. Van Dinter. Now, I heard he might be backstage to join us for the interview, so we'll bring him on in just a little bit. But before we get to that point, I want to let everybody know that Cass has chosen a charity. For every Community Keynotes episode, we raise money for a good cause. And Cass has chosen to raise money today for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. They are a nonprofit organization dedicated to finding cures for Crohn's and colitis and improving the quality of life of children and adults affected by these diseases. Your money matters, and we would love to raise some money for this incredible foundation. So we have a couple ways that you can give. You can text to the number that you see there on the screen. You can scan the QR code that you see there, or you can click on givebutter.com/community keynotes and simply select Cass's episode to direct your money. 60% of what we raise will go directly to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, and 40% will stay to fund the production of Community Keynotes. Now, we have another fun thing to share with you today. Cass's story has inspired a whole line of merchandise. 10% of those proceeds will benefit the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. We have masks and t-shirts. You can see, I think my favorite is I'm just a poop machine. We have it for on t-shirts and bags and all sorts of things. And you can wear masks to make sure that you are letting your healthcare team and your doctor know that you love them. So please go to storystore.us and check out the merchandise that has been inspired by Cass's story. And with that, I'd like to invite the whole crew back on screen so we can dive in deeper to your story. Take it away, Amani.
All right, Cass, well done. So proud of you. Great job. My first question, you're welcome. My first question to you is, throughout life, how have you been able to develop the resilience to see your treatments through time after time?
Great question. I think the biggest thing has been having the support of people around me who wanted me to get better, whether it be my family. I've had some really great friends, people who, and I found the more that I was honest with myself and with them about what was happening, they would go out and do their own research about Crohn's disease and be like, well, did you know this? And did you hear this? And maybe we should try eating more of these things. And so that really was helpful when it came to my own treatment. And I think the biggest thing was what I was doing was not working. Me trying to muscle through and me trying to ignore having Crohn's was not effective. It just landed me in the hospital. And again, I love a good nap, but ultimately I wanted to be healthy. And I just had to realize that it wasn't working the way I was doing it. And so let me submit to the things that are around me that are going to help me.
Excellent. Dr. Van Dinter, welcome to the show. We are excited to have you here today. The first question we have for you is, what can patients do to help their practitioners provide the best care?
Great. Be happy to answer that. Cass, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think you did an amazing job of bringing out some very, very important points. I think one of the most important things that patients can do is to be involved in their care, be active, be engaged. I will commonly tell my patients that the best patient is one that's the most informed and the most educated. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've been reading WebMD all day, but they're involved in that decision-making process. We have a lot of great medicines for Crohn's disease. Some of these medicines are very powerful. And I tell my patients, be careful what you read on the internet about them, because sometimes you can read, all of the bad things, but not the good things that some of these medicines can do for our patients with Crohn's disease. A wonderful resource, and thank you, Cass, for raising money. A wonderful resource is the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. They've been around for a long time. They do lots of great things and have lots of wonderful support groups and meetings.
I want to ask you a follow-up question, Dr. Van Dinter, because it's obvious from the time we met, Cass, that you two are very close and you trust each other very much. What is essential to the doctor-patient relationship from your perspective so that you're able to develop such a strong bond with someone like Cass, who had to fire a previous doctor?
Yeah, so I think one thing that immediately struck me about Cass when I first met her 10 years ago was just how warm, engaging, and how positive she was. Despite everything she had been through from the age of 14, she was very positive, very forward-looking, and was very accepting of her situation. And I think that's very, very important. Cass also, has tremendous support. Her husband Danny is a great man, and I think has been very, very supportive for her, and I think that's key as well.
Interesting.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I want a relationship with my doctor like yours. Fantastic. This is so refreshing. I'm so glad to see this. Thank you for sharing.
I tell him all the time I'm his favorite patient. So it's
And you are. You are.
Well, since you said that, Cass, that's a good segue. Why is Cass your favorite patient, Dr. Van Dinter?
Yeah, I think what I said before, that she's just so warm and engaging and positive. We laugh and joke around. She's a wonderful advocate for herself as well as for others, and it's very refreshing. And if I could just back up for a minute, and I always encourage my patients that if they don't feel comfortable with a recommendation, that they always consider a second opinion. And sometimes patients aren't comfortable doing that, and Cass was, and we've had, we were able to establish this great relationship almost 10 years ago, and have been able to get her through some things because of that. And so if you're suffering from a gastrointestinal disease and you're not happy with your current care, you feel like you need to look at other options, it's always a good idea to get a second or third opinion.
Cass, I'm going to come back to you now. If we could go back, you're just entering DePaul University in Chicago, 18, 19-year-old Cass, give her advice based on what you know now. What advice would you give your younger self?
I think the biggest thing that I wish I would have learned sooner is acceptance that I will have Crohn's forever. At the time I went to DePaul, I was still in between acceptance and denial. And, I was so young when I got diagnosed that it was just really hard to even think about the rest of what my life was going to be like. And so I was like, oh, well, you can't see past 10 years. You're 14, you think about you're going to be 20, and at 18, you don't know what's going to happen. And so I think the biggest thing is like, girl, you're going to be dealing with this for a long time. And it's a marathon. My dad always says it's a marathon, not a sprint. So be kind to yourself, but also like, this is what it is.
So I want to ask you, Dr. Van Dinter, when you see patients that really are able to deal with this disease and kind of fight through it, what are some of the most common characteristics you've noticed in their personalities that allow them to kind of keep at it and just get through it?
That's a really good question, Amani. And I think what Cass just said is very, very important, particularly in my younger patients with Crohn's disease who are in college or recently diagnosed, is to try to get them to understand and accept that this is a lifelong disease. Unfortunately, we don't have a cure for Crohn's disease. We have good treatments for Crohn's, but it's something that I try to really remind my patients, accept it, try to embrace it, because it's something that we can control, but it's not something that we can cure. And that's a common dilemma, particularly I'm faced with in my patients in their 20s. We'll start them on treatment, they'll get better, and then they will stop that treatment, and I'll see them back a year later and they'll be in bad shape. And I think one of the reasons they will sometimes stop treatment is they haven't got to that point of the where we accept the diagnosis and what it means long term. That it's a long term, it's a marathon, not a sprint, just as Cass pointed out.
I think too, the biggest thing for acceptance for me was understanding, and it's kind of hard because I mean, Crohn's is a debilitating disease. Like, I really know that I am extremely blessed and lucky to be as healthy as I am. Even though I had a resection, I've never had, you know, like there's some people out there who don't have their digestional tract at all, who have a whole nother set of problems. And so I think for me, I was forced to accept the more that I heard other people's stories, and almost like, okay, well, I don't want to get to the point where I have to have more surgery and more issues. And I think also I always kind of had a vision of the life that I wanted. And Dr. Van Dinter, I don't know if you know this, but like, or remember this, but when I decided I wanted to have a baby, like that was a huge decision that I had to include him in, because of the medications that I was on were not medications in which you can get pregnant on. And so we had to talk about, how am I going to continue to be healthy through this pregnancy? What OBGYN would you recommend who has treated someone with Crohn's disease, right? So there's all these decisions that are life decisions that necessitate having someone who's going to be an advocate with you and talk through them with you. And when he's like, yeah, sure, let's just take you off of this. I think it'll be fine. And he was so confident. And I just I started crying. I'm like, wait, what? You know, so you just have to keep thinking about the rest of your life and having a vision for that within your acceptance, and get a good therapist. That's all.
Pro tip, exactly.
I don't know about you, Amani, if I can. I know you got another question, but what resonates with me most, thank you both for sharing this, is you have to trust each other. Like, you trusted his recommendations. Doctor, you trust her to take your recommendations, and you've created such an amazing team. That is really unique. I don't know if you realize how unique that is, but that I know certainly has inspired me. I'm sure it will inspire the viewers to work with their healthcare providers as a team and proactively create a plan for the future, for your life. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely. One final question for each of you. First, Dr. Van Dinter, I'm curious, why are you so passionate about helping people with Crohn's disease?
So one of the things is that I have a family history of Crohn's disease. I have a close family member with Crohn's, which inspired some of my interest in gastroenterology. And so I almost grew up kind of knowing about Crohn's disease. And so, and then of course, in medical school and residency, I was really drawn to the kind of variety of problems that can affect the gastrointestinal tract.
Okay. A little freeze there. So I'll go to you, Cass. You mentioned something during your speech.
Yeah,
you said, go ahead. A little bit internet issues, but Cass, you say there are always solutions. You said that in your speech.
Mm-hmm.
How can we as audience members apply that to our personal and maybe our professional life? Because that's excellent wisdom.
I think it's, well, one, listen to experts, understand that you don't know everything. And so do some research, do some digging, use the people around you in order to ask, pointed questions. I think there's also there's a lot of value in being creative, and having a spirit of yes I can do this, and yes I know that this is going to be better, or this may be hard, but I've done hard things before. I think once you get into that rhythm, it's a lot easier to maintain that kind of positive mental outlook when it comes to finding solutions for complex problems. It might not be the solution that you first come to. It might not be, you might have to try a whole bunch of different things, but you're going to find a solution if you just keep trying.
Absolutely. With that, thanks to you both, I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa, who's going to take us home from the show.
Excellent job. Thank you both for joining the show. Viewers, I'm sure you have gotten just as much out of this story as I have. Truly enjoyed having them both on the show. Thank you again. So I want to share a couple of things with you. So next week is our finale of season 2. We are featuring Joanna Smith. Oh my goodness, you are in for a treat. Make sure that you tune in next Monday, December 14th at noon Central for the finale of the show. And if you are someone who has a story who would like to share on our show, we are announcing we will have a season 3. So go to communitykeynotes.com and click on the Speak tab to learn more about how you can share your story on our show. Be well, everyone. We'll see you next week.